Psalm 46 verse 9, in the New International Version, reads like this. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. So there's smoke. There are bows snapped over somebody's knee, spear shafts in pieces, a pile of shields going up in flames, which means leather and wood and hide, and the smell of that is awful. Somebody has just ended a war by confiscating the equipment and setting it on fire. The very next thing out of God's mouth, the line that follows the burning, is this: "Be still and know that I am God." That's where the sentence lives. It's spoken over wreckage, to people who have just watched the world nearly come apart. Back up a few more verses and the noise gets louder still. Earth giving way, mountains falling into the heart of the sea, water roaring and foaming, nations in an uproar. Then a voice says, "Be still." Nothing's wrong with putting that line where you'll see it in the morning. It belongs there. The Hebrew underneath it, though, is doing something bigger than lowering the volume. And once you've seen what the word actually pictures, the verse stops being a suggestion about mood and turns into an order you can obey on the worst day of your life. Let's walk back through the whole psalm and get there properly. Start with the thing the English can't quite carry. The Hebrew verb behind be still is Raphah. Its root sense has to do with slackening, loosening, going limp. It's a word about tension leaving something. When the Hebrew Bible uses it in its plain form, it very often describes hands, fingers dropping open, grip failing, strength draining out of the arms of a person who's been holding on hard. That's the picture, hands opening, which means the command in Psalm 46:10 is aimed at whatever you're clutching. It's addressed to the white knuckles. And it arrives deliberately in the middle of a collapse, because that's exactly when a person grips hardest. The familiar reading of the verse is a true reading. Quiet belongs to it, and I'll show you why the translators had solid ground under them. It's a narrow slice of a much wider command. The English tells you to stop. The Hebrew tells you what stops. Everything else in this study grows out of that one shift, where the psalm sits, who's being told to let go, what the second half of the verse means when it says, "no," which is a stranger word than it looks, and a promise buried in the same Hebrew root, spoken by God about himself, that turns the whole command inside out. But first, the song itself. Psalm 46 has a heading, and the heading is easy to skip. It's attached to the sons of Korah. The sons of Korah were temple musicians, a guild of Levite singers who served in the worship of Israel, and 11 psalms carry their name. Here's the part most people never connect. Their ancestor Korah is the man in Numbers 16 who led a rebellion against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness and died under the judgment that followed. The ground opened. His household went down. Then Numbers 26 notes, almost in passing, that the line of Korah did not end there. His sons lived. 1 Chronicles picks the family up generations later, with Korahites stationed as gatekeepers at the sanctuary, and one of them entrusted with baking the bread for the offerings. Descendants of a rebel handed the keys to the doors their ancestor once tried to storm. So the family of the man swallowed by the earth becomes the family that leads Israel in worship. And a psalm from that guild opens with the earth giving way and mountains dropping into the sea, and insists we will not fear. Whether they chose those images on purpose is beyond proving. Still, it's hard to read the heading and the opening lines together and feel nothing at all. The heading also carries a word, a lamoth, which appears to be a musical instruction of some kind. Its exact sense is uncertain. Possibly a tune, possibly a range of voices, possibly a type of instrument. That's honestly as far as the evidence goes, and I'd rather tell you that than invent a meaning. Now the shape of it. The psalm falls into 3 movements, marked by the word Selah, which functions as some kind of musical pause or lift in performance. Twice a refrain lands, once in verse 7 and once at the very end in verse 11. The Lord Almighty is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress. Both times, the same words. That refrain is the psalm's heartbeat, and it's the line to hold on to because it tells you the singers are not describing safe conditions. They're describing a presence inside unsafe conditions. Movement 1 is a cosmic earthquake. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. For an ancient Israelite, that language isn't weather. Mountains were the fixed things, the furniture of the world, the one part of creation you could count on being where you left it. The sea was chaos, the deep, the place of monsters and drowning, and everything a farming people had no way to control. So mountains falling into the sea means the stable order sliding into the chaos. It's the language of everything solid failing at once. And the verb, tucked into that opening confession, is doing quiet work too. God is called an ever-present help in trouble, which in Hebrew reads closer to a help richly found, abundantly available. The kind of help a person stumbles into rather than hunts for. The rest of the psalm stands on that ground. Before anybody is told to release anything, the singers have already announced who's near. Movement 2 answers the roaring with water of a different kind. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. The psalm calls that city the holy place where God himself dwells. Stop on that a second, because Jerusalem has no river. What it had was the Gihon spring on the eastern slope. Hezekiah's engineers cut a tunnel through solid rock, roughly a third of a mile of it, so water could reach inside the walls before a siege cut the city off. Egypt had the Nile. Babylon had the Euphrates. Assyria had the Tigris. Every great capital of the ancient world sat on moving water, and Jerusalem sat on a ridge with a spring. So when the singers put a river in the city of God, they're reaching past geography on purpose. Ezekiel later sees water flowing out from under the temple threshold, growing deeper as it goes, until it's a river nobody can cross. Revelation ends with a river of the water of life running down the middle of the city street. The roaring sea in verse 3 tries to drown the world. The quiet streams in verse 4 gladden it. Same substance, opposite work, and the difference is whose city it's running through. Movement 3 brings the noise back, only now it's human. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall, he lifts his voice, and the earth melts. The Hebrew verb for the nations being in uproar is the same one used a few lines earlier for the raging water. Kingdoms make the sound of a storm. Armies roar like surf. And into all that sound God speaks a single time, and the earth melts, which is a word for something losing its solidity and running like wax. Then verse 9, the disarming and the fire. Then verse 10. Many readers have connected this psalm to the year the Assyrian army under Sennacherib surrounded Jerusalem in the days of King Hezekiah, when the siege broke off and the city stood. It fits beautifully. A hostile army camped outside, an untouched city inside, abandoned equipment on the ground when the dust cleared. The psalm never names an event though, so that setting stays a tradition rather than a fact, and I'll leave it there. Now the word itself. Raphah shows up across the Hebrew Bible in ways that make its physical sense hard to miss. Jeremiah 6:24 describes a nation hearing that an army is on the way, and it reads, "We have heard the reports about them, and our hands hang limp. Anguish has gripped us." That's Raphah. The arms go slack. Whatever a person was holding, they aren't holding it now. Zephaniah 3:16 uses the same picture pointed the other direction, as encouragement. The prophet tells Zion to drop its fear, then adds this line, "Do not let your hands hang limp. Keep the grip, stay in the fight," which tells you the image was common enough that a prophet could use it either way and be understood immediately. And in 2 Samuel 4, when word reaches the household of Saul's son that his protector has been killed, the account says his hands became feeble and the whole nation was alarmed. Courage leaving a man gets described as tension leaving his hands. That's how physical this vocabulary is. So the plain form of the verb describes strength letting go, usually against a person's will. Fear does it to them. The form in Psalm 46:10 works differently. It's causative, and it's a command, and it's plural. Loosely, the sense runs, make it slack. Cause the grip to release, let it go. And when that causative form shows up elsewhere, English translators handle it in ways that feel surprising if you've only ever met the word on a wall. In Deuteronomy 9, Moses is recounting the golden calf, standing on the mountain with the tablets in his hands, and he reports God saying, "Let me alone, so that I may destroy them." Let me alone. Take your hands off me. That's the same verb form, and Moses does the opposite. He falls down and intercedes for 40 days. In 1 Samuel 15, Saul has disobeyed the word given to him and starts explaining himself, and Samuel cuts him off mid-sentence. The Hebrew there is a single word from this root, and the New International Version renders it, enough. Stop talking, drop it. Psalm 37:8 uses it again in a line about the inner life. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Loosen your hold on the anger, set it down. Which is a striking thing to say about an emotion, because it treats resentment as something a person is actively carrying rather than something happening to them. Put all of those together and the range is clear. Let go of, leave alone, back off, quit, release, abandon a position you've been defending. Here's the fair part, and I want to handle it carefully because it would be easy to make the translators sound careless, and they were nothing of the kind. The standard Hebrew lexicons do list be quiet, do nothing, cease, among the live senses of this form, and they list Psalm 46:10 right there as an example of it. Anyone who wrote be still was reading the word honestly, in line with the scholarship, and the phrase has carried real comfort to real people for 400 years in English. The gain from going back to the Hebrew is precision rather than correction. Be still tells you to stop. Raphah tells you which muscles. So the command lands as an action aimed at your hands rather than a mood the psalm wants you to manufacture. And what gives it force is where it's placed. God says it while mountains are sliding into the sea and armies are being disarmed by force. It's an order given inside noise to people who are grabbing for anything that will hold, and the reason they can obey it is that somebody else has already taken the situation in hand. Quick word before we continue. If this is the kind of study you want more of, subscribing genuinely helps, and it's free. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can join the channel as a member. That support is what keeps the research, the writing, and the production going, and keeps every one of these studies free for anyone who needs them. And to everyone already supporting the channel, a real thank you. This work exists because of you. Now back to the psalm, and to a question I skipped past. Who exactly is being told to let go? Verse 10 is God speaking. Up to that point, the psalm has been the congregation singing about God in the third person. He is our refuge. He breaks the bow. Then the voice changes without warning, and God speaks for himself, and he speaks in commands aimed at a plural you. The second half of the verse gives us a clue about the audience. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The nations. Those are the same nations that were in uproar back in verse 6, the ones whose kingdoms fell. So a long line of readers, including ancient Jewish interpreters, understood verse 10 as God addressing the warring nations directly. Stand down, you're done. Your bows are already broken and your shields are already burning, so open your hands and learn who I am. Others read it as spoken to God's own trembling people. They're the ones who've been watching the mountains fall. They're the ones the refrain keeps reassuring, twice, as if once wasn't sufficient. A word of comfort to frightened worshippers fits the psalm just as naturally as a warning to armies does. Honestly, the argument is unresolved among careful readers, and it may be a false choice. This is a public song sung in a temple, and it aims outward at the nations while landing on the people singing it. The refrain says, "The Lord Almighty is with us." That's a congregation talking about itself, but the command names the whole earth as its audience, which means the attacker and the attacked hear the same instruction. Everyone still holding a weapon is told to open their hands. That's the detail in verse 9 I don't want to rush past. God's method for ending war skips negotiation entirely. He takes the equipment, he breaks the bow, shatters the spear, burns the shields down to ash. The weapons come out of everyone's hands before the command is ever spoken. Then he says, let go. He isn't asking anyone to disarm in a dangerous room and hope for the best. The disarming has already happened. The fire's already lit, and the smoke's already rising. The command comes after the threat has been dealt with, which is why it lands as mercy instead of cruelty. Then comes the second half of the pair. And know that I am God. Know is also a plural command in Hebrew, from the verb yada, and yada reaches well past information. It's knowing by contact, knowing by having lived through it. It's the word for a farmer who knows his land after 30 seasons, a shepherd who knows his flock by sight, a husband and wife who know one another. Facts live inside that word. The center of gravity, though, is experience. So the verse asks for more than correct opinions held in a quiet room. Let go, it says, and you'll find out. The two verbs are chained together. One is how the other happens. Nobody learns that God holds the world by reading it on a card. You learn it the day you stop holding the world yourself and watch it stay up. That's not a lesson anybody can be taught in advance, and it can't be borrowed from someone else's testimony either. It's the kind of knowledge that only arrives on the far side of releasing something, which is uncomfortable because it means the knowing costs you the grip before it pays you anything back. And there's a correction sitting inside the verse that most of us walk right past. Take the whole line and ask what outcome God actually names. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The stated goal is God being exalted. Your feelings are not the subject of the sentence. Peace is a genuine result of trusting God, and Scripture promises peace in plenty of other places and means it. The reason given here is that the God who ended the war intends to be recognized for it across the whole earth. Your open hands are part of that recognition. You loosen your grip, He gets the credit, and you come to know Him in the process. That's a far larger sentence than a personal calming exercise, and a far better one because it means your letting go is connected to something happening at the scale of nations. There's one more place this root appears, and it changes the tone of everything. Joshua 1. Moses is dead. Joshua is standing at the edge of a river with an entire nation behind him and a military campaign in front of him. Every reason for his hands to shake is present in the scene. And God says to him, "As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you." I will never leave you. The Hebrew there is lo arpeka, and it's built on Raphah, same root as the command in Psalm 46. So the sense underneath the English runs close to this. I will not let go of you. I will not loosen my grip on you. My hands will not go slack. The same wording runs through the end of Deuteronomy, where Moses says it to Israel as a whole, and then turns and says it to Joshua personally in front of everyone. And the letter to the Hebrews picks that promise up centuries later and hands it to a nervous group of Christians who were losing property and standing for their faith. The writer quotes it as settled fact. God has said, "Never will I leave you." Then he carries the second half of the pledge across as well, that God will not forsake them either. A promise spoken at a riverbank before a war ends up in a letter to a church under pressure, doing the same work. Now line the two up. The verb God commands of us in Psalm 46 is the one He rules out for Himself. We're told to slacken. He announces He never will.
Your hands can open because His don't. That's the logic holding the whole thing together, and it's why the command isn't reckless advice. If nobody's holding what you set down, letting go is just abandonment. The psalm can say what it says because verse 1 already established who's on duty. God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in trouble. The help arrives before the command does, which is the order these things have to come in. Now, a distinction we need because it would be easy to hear all this and draw a lazy conclusion from it. Open hands are not folded hands. Passivity has no place in Psalm 46, and the God of this song is the busiest character in it. He breaks, He shatters, He burns. He lifts His voice and the earth melts. He's doing every bit of the work while the singers are told to release theirs, and there's no moment in the piece where nothing is happening. The same scripture that says let go says a great deal else besides. Stand firm, keep watch, work with your hands, resist the devil, fight the good fight. Joshua hears, "I will not let go of you," and then immediately receives orders to cross a river, take a fortified city, and be strong and courageous, 3 separate times in one chapter. The promise arrived with an assignment attached, and it's what made that assignment survivable. So Raphah in Psalm 46 is a call to quit one particular kind of doing, the frantic kind, the self-rescue, the grabbing that happens when a person becomes convinced that everything depends on how tightly they hold. One translation note along the way, and it's genuinely interesting rather than a gotcha. In Exodus 14, at the edge of the Red Sea, Moses tells the terrified Israelites, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Same English phrase, different Hebrew verb, one connected to silence and keeping quiet. English uses be still to cover more than one Hebrew idea, which is normal for translation and no scandal at all. Both passages are true, and both are saying it with a different picture. Exodus says, "Stop shouting." Psalm 46 says, "Open your hands." Which brings me to the clearest picture I know of what that looks like in practice. Open water lifeguards are trained to be careful about how they approach a drowning swimmer. A person in real panic has stopped thinking. Their entire body is committed to getting their head above water, and anything solid that comes within reach becomes something to climb, including the rescuer. Guards get pushed under by the people they came for. It happens often enough that the training is built around it. Approach from behind where possible. Bring flotation and put it between you and them. Keep your distance until the panic breaks. And the instruction, shouted to the person in the water, is the one their body refuses to accept. Stop swimming. Stop fighting. Roll onto your back. Let your arms go slack. Because the thrashing is what's drowning them, and help can't reach a person who's still trying to save themselves. That's the command in Psalm 46. It's shouted, and it's shouted by someone already in the water with you. Which is where the Gospels walk in. Psalm 46 begins with roaring, foaming water and a God who is an ever-present help in trouble. In Mark 4, that's the scene, literally. A squall comes down on the lake, the waves are breaking over the boat, it's filling with water, and men who have fished this lake their whole lives are bailing for their lives. Jesus is asleep in the stern, on a cushion, which Mark mentions almost as a provocation. They wake him with a question that has an edge on it. "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He gets up and speaks to the wind and the sea. Their technique goes unmentioned. He addresses the water itself, the same chaotic deep that Psalm 46 says roars and foams and swallows mountains, and it goes flat. I want to be careful here. Mark is written in Greek, and the words Jesus uses are his own, so I'm not claiming a hidden link between his command and the Hebrew verb in the psalm. What I'm pointing at is the situation. The psalm says God rules the raging water and is present in the trouble. The disciples watch a man in their boat do exactly that, and the question they're left holding is the question the psalm already answered. Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Then there's a garden, later, and it runs the other direction. In Gethsemane, the pressure isn't coming from outside. Jesus is in anguish, sweating, asking 3 separate times for the cup to pass from him. No calm room, no gentle light through a window, no serenity anywhere in the account. And what he says is the human shape of this command carried out perfectly. Yet not my will, but yours be done. That's the open hand. Held out in the dark, with full knowledge of the cost, by someone who wanted a different answer and asked for one out loud. Whatever else obedience to Psalm 46 verse 10 looks like, it looks like that. And it did not feel peaceful while it was happening, which should settle something for anyone who's ever felt like a failure for struggling. The releasing and the anguish can occupy the same hour. They did in that garden. So what does this mean where you actually live? If you're managing something you can't fix, this verse is talking to you. A diagnosis, and a folder of results you keep opening as though reading harder will change the numbers. A stretch of unemployment where you've sent the applications and now you're just refreshing an inbox at 11 at night. A grown child who isn't answering your messages. A marriage in a season neither of you knows how to name yet. The grip is the part you can drop. The duty stays with you. You still take the medication, you still send the next application, still write the letter, still show up and do the hard work of loving someone who's difficult right now. Letting go has nothing to do with walking away from responsibility. What it releases is the exhausting conviction that the outcome rests on how tightly you hold on. Gone with it is the belief that if you stop rehearsing the worst case, you'll be caught unprepared, along with the quiet assumption that staying vigilant is the same thing as staying in control. Ask yourself what you're actually holding at 2 in the morning, because it's usually not a task. Tasks can be written down and done. It's an outcome, and outcomes were never in your hands to begin with. You've been gripping something that was never yours to carry, which is why the gripping never once made you feel safer. I'd be lying to you if I said opening your hands guarantees the result you want. The psalm makes no such promise. It promises a refuge, a presence, and a God who will be recognized across the whole earth for what he's done.
People who let go still get bad news sometimes. What changes is who's carrying them while they hear it. And the verse pairs releasing with knowing for a reason. Some things about God can't be learned any other way. You find out that He holds you at the moment you stop holding yourself, and not 1 second earlier. So come back to the smoke. The bows are broken, the spears are in pieces, the shields are burning down to nothing in a field where a war used to be. The nations have stopped shouting. The mountains that slid into the sea are somebody else's problem now, and the water that roared has gone quiet. And into that, a voice. Let your hands drop. Loosen your hold. Then you'll find out who I am, because I'm going to be recognized in every corner of the earth for what just happened here. Then the singers answer with the refrain one last time, and the psalm ends where it started, on the same 6 words. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. With us. Present tense, in the middle of the trouble, not waiting politely on the far side of it for us to arrive. So keep the line where you can see it. It belongs on the wall, and it belongs in your mourning. Just let it be the size it actually is. Quiet is welcome, and feeling better is a real mercy, and this verse offers more than either. It's a command from the God who ended a war, given to everyone still white-knuckling something, and it says the same thing to the frightened and the fighting alike. Open your hands. He isn't going to open his.